Hello, I'm Gwen Hill from Pine Ridge Baptist Church Sunday School Department, Ladies Class, and we are doing a study on Daniel. And we are in the middle of chapter 5 today. Last week we talked about Belshazzar, who is the reigning king of Babylon, the last king. We're talking about the last night of his reign as well. He doesn't know that at this point in our story, but yep, it is. Daniel is a Jewish man who was taken as a youth from Jerusalem, from Israel, and he has been in Babylonian captivity since then. He is now a man in his 80s, 83-ish, 84. He has been trained to be one of the advisors to King Nebuchadnezzar, who is now dead, and this is a relative of his. They talk about him like he's his grandson, but he is from the son-in-law. He is related to the son-in-law, Belshazzar. Belshazzar is one of two. The real king of Babylon is now in Assyria, and he has assigned Babylon over to his son to reign, make him a co-regent. So he is also a king in Babylon. This has not been a good reign. He has turned his back on everything that Belshazzar had learned. Not Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar had learned. He is an egotistical, prideful man, and he is surrounded at present by the Medo-Persians. And he is very, very arrogant and thinks that he is, where he is impenetrable. He will always be king. There's something happened on the wall. In a big hall, he had 1,000 of his men there. And if you can think about how the fortress, the guards around the fortress, all of the commanders were in this big room. Celebrating. Don't know what. They thought they were celebrating. Maybe they were just trying to up their morale, or maybe they were celebrating that they thought the invincibility that they thought they had. 300-foot tall walls surround the city that were about 65 to 80 feet wide. They could have chariot races on the top. Every 16 lengths they had in the wall, they would have a watchtower. It was a very fortified city, and they thought they were invincible. So he compounds his leadership problems by calling for the vessels that they had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, and they are using these for immoral purposes, for drinking the drinks and making fun of the Jehovah God, and this is not going to fly. There has been a hand appear within the king's vision. He watches this hand as it writes out a message on the wall opposite him, and it has scared him almost to death. He's trembling. He can't hold his own weight. He can't stand erect good. He is pale, and then it said he got even paler. He has called for his wise men. Tell me what this says. They can't. It was probably written in Hebrew, and the Chaldeans didn't speak Hebrew. But the queen's mother, who was drawn to the party room because all of a sudden they had gotten quiet. Well, I don't know about you, but I would be shocked if I saw a disembodied hand writing words on the plaster wall. They got quiet. And like any good mother, she comes to see what's wrong, and she recognizes that there's a problem, and she recommends to him that he call Daniel, who's still alive, who's still nearby, to call him in. I said last week, after I wrote chapter or verse 16, right before I got to verse 16 in chapter 5, I said, I can see Daniel taking his time. He's older, and they've been partying hardy all evening. I think they probably had to get Daniel out of bed, or at least wake him up out of his lounge chair. I can see him taking his time to comply to come to the king's presence. But he has. He has come. And this is how Daniel comes in, and the king automatically just addresses him, and he says, "Are you that Daniel? The one I've heard about. Are you that Daniel?" And he's going to let on like he knows Daniel, like he knows Daniel's history. He should have. He should have. Nebuchadnezzar has only been gone 5 or 6 years. And he should have remembered the testimony of Nebuchadnezzar. He should have kept abreast of who the most efficient advisors were. And he's going to pretend like he knew who Daniel was. In verse 16, King Belshazzar is speaking, and he says, "But I personally have heard about you, and that you are able to give interpretations and solve difficult problems. Now, if you are able to read the inscription," and I can almost see him gesturing toward the wall, can't you? "And make its interpretation known to me, you will be clothed with purple and wear a necklace of gold around your neck, and you will have authority as the third ruler of the kingdom." Third ruler is because he himself is the second. So he would make him a co-regency with himself. So he would be the third in line in power. And he said in verse 17, "And then Daniel answered and said before the king." Now, I called your attention last week when the Queen Mother came in and she addressed the king. She looked at him and she said, "O king, live forever." Our whole study in the book of Daniel has had everybody come in before the king use that same phrase, and it was a speech of loyalty, and it was being very cordial and very courtly to say, "O king, live forever." But I want you to listen to Daniel. This is the first time Daniel speaks. In verse 17, "Then Daniel answered and said before the king, keep your gifts for yourself, or give your rewards to someone else. However, I will read the inscription to the king and make the interpretation known to him. O king, the Most High God granted sovereignty, grandeur, glory, and majesty to Nebuchadnezzar, your father. Because of the grandeur which he bestowed on him, will the peoples, the nation, and the men of every language feared and trembled before him. Whomever he wished to kill, whomever he was killed, and whomever he wished he spared alive, and whomever he wished he elevated, and whoever he wished he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit became so proud that he behaved arrogantly, he was deposed from his royal throne and his glory, and was taken away from him. He was also driven away from mankind, and his heart was made like that of the beast, and his dwelling place was with the wild donkeys. He was given grass to eat like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of the heaven until he recognized the Most High God is ruler over the realm of mankind, and that he sets over it, whomever he wishes. Did you notice he didn't say, "O king, live forever"? It's because he has a great disdain for him. I'll ask you at the end of the study that we did on the verses just prior to this, I said, read ahead and then imagine how Daniel felt. Daniel walks in. The first thing it's going to hit him is because the noise has gone down now, but the scent. These people have been drinking a lot. There's a scent there. He also looks at the dress that they have on, the garb that they have on. They would have had on their most fancy clothing that they could wear. The ladies would have been not dressed so sweetly. He would have recognized that. And then he would have seen those vessels from the temple, and he knew in an instant where they belonged, how they were to be used, to whom they belonged. And he was incensed. He was absolutely livid, I believe. I believe as you look at this, there was so much disdain and distaste, and there's no way in the world he would say, "Oh, King, live forever." Because he's glanced at those words on the wall, and he knew this man wasn't going to live forever, probably wasn't going to live the night out. And he could tell by the words on the wall how irate his God was. So he just launched into, he said, "Yeah, all these gifts that you promised me, a third of the kingdom and all the robes and jewelry, keep it. I don't want it, and I don't need it. Give it over to somebody else. However, I will tell you what the writing on the wall says, and I'll interpret it for you." And then he gives him a history lesson to remind him of who Almighty God is, who Jehovah God is. And he said, "Your own father found out who he was. He himself was a piece of arrogant mess, and God sent him in judgment into the fields for 7 years to act as an animal. When he came to his mind and recognized who Jehovah God was, God put him back in his position. And you knew this. You are not young enough to say that you were not aware of this. You knew. If you ever wondered if you were going to be called into account for the sins that we commit, you should have known. Yeah. Belshazzar was. He says, you knew. You knew. And he went over him. He says, you have a right to be fearful. You didn't learn. You didn't pay attention. You didn't look at what happened behind you. You didn't learn from your elders. It's a sad thing, Belshazzar. And he said, the power that Nebuchadnezzar had was given to him by Jehovah God. And he said in verse 22 down through 24, yet you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all of this. But you have exalted yourself against the Lord of the heavens, and they have brought the vessels of his house before you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines have been drinking wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and of gold and of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see, hear, or understand. But the God in whose hand your life breath and all of your ways you have not glorified. Then the hand was sent from him, and this inscription was written out. Up until now, we know that there was a writing on the wall, but no one's told us, the reader. Daniel hasn't put the inscription down of what was there until this next verse. But listen to what he says to Belshazzar. He says, you should have known, Belshazzar. It was the height of your arrogance, and God hates pride. You have nothing to be prideful about. Everything comes from God. And you chose arrogance, and you brought out the vessels that were dedicated to the temple and to the use for our God, Jehovah God, and you made a sacrilege out of them. You contaminated them. You put them in front. You cast them before, in essence, before swine. He said, not only you drunk them, but your wives and your concubines. In other words, you had a sex orgy while you were using them. You have desecrated. You've got lots of gods. You could have done your own desecration to your own gods. Of course, they don't see anything. They can't talk to you, and they can't help you in any way. But if you want to worship them, you should have used the implements for your gods. These belong to Jehovah God. He holds the breath in your body. The very act of you breathing is under Jehovah God's control. Do you know they say that the name Yahweh in Hebrew is actually inhale, exhale. Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. The last thing you say before you die, and the first thing you say when you are a brand new baby being born, you inhale and exhale. And you're saying the name of Yahweh. And he says he holds the breath in your body. The very fact that you're alive is because he's controlling it from the palm of his hand. Not from the might of his arm, but from the hand. And he said that same hand has wrote a message for you. In verse 25, he begins to tell him this inscription and what it means. He said, now this is the inscription was written out. Mene, mene, tekel, UPHARSIN. And this is the interpretation of the message. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. Do you notice he says it twice? I tell my class all the time, when God says something twice, close together, same sentence or the same paragraph, pay attention, because he intends for that to be an attention getter. He intends for that to be a stressor. He intends for us to understand this is important for you to know. Sometimes it's a warning. And here he said, mene, mene, you've been judged. You've been judged. You've been weighed. And you're light. This is TEKEL, verse 27. TEKEL. Mene, mene, TEKEL. You have been weighed on the scales and found deficient. Have you ever been to New York and seen the Statue of Liberty? It holds the scales. You put a weight on one side, and then if it does this side is heavier. If it does this side's heavier. God put his clean life here. And no, it wasn't even. The weight of the sin was horrific. The weight of the sin was horrific. I haven't read of anybody else in the Bible that God tells them their sin is so bad that it must be written on the wall. But this man's was. And he says, you have been found deficient. UPHARSIN also is like in verse 28, it says press. And that's the same word. Okay? It's the same, it has the same meaning. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Since chapter 2, we have known that there was going to be a second kingdom after Babylon. It is not as learned, but it is very strong. The metal is stronger. Silver is stronger than gold. And it's mighty. And it's not going to have the elitism or the understanding or the power that Babylon had, concentrated power, but they're going to take them over. Now he's saying, it's coming. It's coming. Daniel is looking right straight in Belshazzar's face, and he says, your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. Belshazzar knows that the Medes and Persians are coming toward his fortified walls. He knows it. He thinks he's invincible. He thinks they can't get to him, but he knows they're there. And Daniel tells him, God's already given them the battle. You're going to lose. You're going to have, your kingdom is going to be given to them. It's going to be divided and given over to them. Verse 29, then Belshazzar gave orders, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a necklace of gold around his neck and issued a proclamation concerning him that he now had authority as the third ruler in the kingdom. Give Belshazzar a credit here. He kept his word, and he gave kudos to Daniel. He put the golden necklace around his neck, put the purple robe around him, gave him a scepter. And Daniel has already told him he's not interested in this. Daniel knows, well, there's only going to be a few hours left in the reign. It's a little bit too late to do anything like this now for me to accomplish anything. But God has reasonings, and we'll see those reasonings a little bit later. But I wonder why Belshazzar kept his word and why he showered this on Daniel. I know he said he was going to. But has he impressed you as a strong leader who keeps his word up until now? He hasn't done so to me. So why did he do it? I think he was really hoping that if he honored God's man, that God would not hold him accountable for what he had been doing the hours before Daniel appeared in his party hall. Do we ever think that we can clean up our mess ourselves, that we don't need God? See, he didn't turn to God here. I think he's trying to appease God by saying, hey, look, Jehovah God, I'm going to make a big deal out of your man here. That ought to count for something. We need God. Belshazzar didn't recognize that. So he honored Daniel. Can you see Daniel as they stand behind him and clasp the necklace? It would have been a heavy gold necklace around his neck. His eyes are closed and he may be gently shaking his head no. As they put the robe on him, I don't think there was an ounce of, oh boy, look at me, anywhere in that room coming from Daniel. Daniel was saying, it's not going to work, Belshazzar. It's too late. They put the scepter in his hand. That means he was a fellow regent, the third, number 3 regent. It didn't impress Daniel. That same night, in verse 30, that same night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was slain. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about the age of 62. A warrior full grown, a very astute man. There are a lot of people who try to identify Darius, and they say they cannot find anything in history that tells you that this Darius ever existed. Well, I don't have any trouble with it at all. They also said Pontius Pilate didn't exist, that there was no proof for him till in 1959, 56 or 59, maybe 59, they found a placard that had his name and that he was the regent in Jerusalem for Rome. identifying who he is, and since then they found 2 or 3 more. So just the matter of fact that they haven't found it yet does mean to me that it doesn't exist. I don't have any trouble with it at all. Some people say Darius is a name, like saying king, that it's a title. We don't really know. But Jesus talked about the prophet Daniel, and I think he gave him all of the validity that he needed. I trust what it says in his book. So whether it was the name of the name of the man or the title of the man, I don't have any problem at all. His name, as is recorded in Daniel 5:30, is Darius. Full-grown warrior, 62 years old, knew what he was doing. Not a co-regent, not a king at this point, but Darius. Darius came in, and he had Belshazzar killed, which was the custom of that time. And when he looked around, he saw Daniel. We're not told this, but when we go into chapter 6 and how he recognizes Daniel, I can almost see him that night wanting to know who the man is that's in authority, that's standing there in the purple robe. And I can see him being identified. Well, that's Daniel. And then him striding up to Daniel, and Daniel looking him straight in the eyes. Because Daniel's not afraid of anybody. He's at the end of his life. He knows it. And he's not afraid. He has known enough about his God. He has stood all night long and listened to the lions roar while the angel protected him. He has heard the story of his 3 best friends, how they walked with God in the fire. And he has seen Nebuchadnezzar. And he interpreted the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar. He knows. Daniel is recognized for the intelligent man that he is. He is recognized that he is a man of God, that has the Spirit of God. And we'll find out more how he is honored and recognized in chapter 6 when we study it the next time. Have a good week. I'll see you later.